home decided to watch some TV, listening to the news by Gordon Mosley, and listening to the things that he say he tracked him tonight, paying close attention to make sure I hear it right. But when I hear the things that he mentioned on the news, I had to declare, them kind of thing got me confused. I hear some things where the ERC noticing, and it convinced people that people they learning nothing. We hear so many times about them big name calling, and they say ERC pretend that they didn't learn nothing. But once you're black, and you just decide to say a word or two, bet your life on that, they say ERC coming for you. Listen to the things you just hear on social media. Only one set of people allowed to talk in one Guyana. I still say nothing, black people in learning. But this is my concern. I hope one day black people will learn. ERC that I would like to know, if any of his members happens to be black people, and if that is the case, I want them to answer this call. Tell me how come none of them ain't got no voice at all. You're showing signs of weakness and you're afraid to be fair, and we see the same thing keep happening year after year. And the day will come when all this nonsense will stop. That will be the day when black people decide to wake up. Not so long ago, something terrible happened. This young Indian man went to kill out all black people by poison. But if his shoes was on the other foot, what a day now they tried. But up to this day, this ERC can do nothing as yet. How come it's only black people committing cybercrime? When pretty on social media fussing people all the time, I still say black people in learning. But one day will come when the entire table will turn. Issues we see that fail to condemn, because these people think that the law is only for them. And anybody else who decide to file a complaint, they go call you a racist and don't want to hear nothing. Plenty complaint from time to time has been brought to their attention, but because of this one-sided cybercrime is why they don't show any concern. There's only one set of people that they really care about, and black people must take the abuse and shut them out. Kidaki Amsterdam went to court just recently for an issue that was highlighted by the ERC. And the pretext the police decide to jump on his case. Without a search warrant, they went and search up the man's place. Let us all agree that black people under attack. Different laws for you and me just because we black. I still singing. Black people in London. To all my black friends, we must put a stop to all this nonsense. Cybercrime laws to keep people silent, just to make sure nobody criticize this government. And while that is a very case of dictatorship, it is no surprise that the ERC ignoring it. Why only the chosen few is allowed to have things their way, when people like me and you must have nothing to say? And when ministers in the government start to launch their attack, you never hear this ERC come out and talk about that. They send a policeman all the way to New York. This fella went up there to serve a customer on with forward. Under they say, this government decide to fabricate a case, but like they forget the warning they get from Black T-shirt jails. The vice president described that the use as a low life. Because of this kind of abuse, he don't have a wife. I still singing. Black people in learning. Just the other day, I would a man see help is on the way.
All right, so today we are here at Club Twilight up in Buxton, and we are here to talk about all that's going on up here. Trust me, if you are on the East Coast, you're in Buxton, you're in Tongue, you're looking for a place to get away to, this is the place. The Cutters, mwah. Listen, I'll be having some just now again. We'll talk about that. And then, of course, the ambience is beautiful, fully air conditioned. The decor is on point. The music's on point. Everything's on point. It's just me. I need some work. But everything else that belongs to this club here is on point. So if you want to find a nice little place where you can just drive out of town and have some drinks, have some food, you can call, you can order your stuff and just take it. You don't have to stay. Or if you want to stay here, that's what's up. And of course, they have special events for Valentine's. You can rent a hall. You can rent a hall, honey. You can rent a hall for weddings, for birthday parties, to have a bash. I hope he edits that out. But you know, whatever it is, this is definitely the place to be. So it's on Sideline Dam. You definitely want to ensure that you check this place out. But it's on your to-do list. All right, on your to-do list. This is definitely the place to check out, you know, a really cool, chill spot here in Buxton. I like this. Buxton needed this. We needed this. I needed this. You definitely needed too. Thank you.
Don't be a victim. Beat the heat with EC crystals. Party ice in large and small quantities. Call 682-7981 or visit us at Club Twilight, Sideline Dam, Buxton North. EC Crystals, pure party ice. Stop running around like headless chicken. Go to Ashton's Marketplace for whole and cut chicken, beef, pork, processed meats like bacon, beef franks, smoked ham, ground pork, calabresa, and lots more. Ashton's offers wholesale and retail. Check them out. Call 613-2332 or WhatsApp 434-327-3955. Ashton's Marketplace at 72 Rob Street, Border.
It's karaoke and oldies night this and every Thursday with Al Christie and popular DJs at Club Twilight, Sideline down Buxton North.
Here, trust me, if you are on the East Coast, you're in Buxton, you're in town, you're looking for a place to get away to, this is the place. The Cutters, mwah. And then of course the ambience is beautiful, fully air conditioned, the decor is on point, the music's on point, everything's on point. So if you want to find a nice little place or you can just drive out of town and have some drinks, have some food, you can call, you can order your stuff and just take it. You don't have to stay. Or if you want to stay here, that's what's up. And of course, they have special events for Valentine's. You can rent a hall. You can rent a hall, honey. You can rent a hall for weddings, for birthday parties, to have a bash. I hope he edits that out. But you know, whatever it is, this is definitely the place to be. So it's on Sideline Dam. You definitely want to ensure that you check this place out. But it's on your to-do list. All right, on your to-do list. This is definitely the place to check out, you know, a really cool, chill spot here in Buxton. I like this. This is, Buxton needed this. We needed this. I needed this. You definitely needed too. All right, so you might be wondering where we are, still in Buxton at Club Twilight. That's where we are. So Club Twilight also has like an Airbnb as well. So you could come, drink, drunk, and come in the back here and lie down. Look at that. Look at that, perfection. And the people come in the room and so on. The bed sheet matching the blind, matching the carpet, matching the this, matching the that. We know but we things in Buxton don't play with we. So definitely if you want to come and, you know, you may be having a wedding or whatever and you just want to overnight and just have a good time because you're going to be drunk. We got too much road accidents. So you definitely want to come, drink, have a good time. They have several rooms that you can rent. You have your toilet, you have your bath, you have your sink, you have your dining area, you have the bed. This is nice. I like it. Anyways, to my friends and my family, if you're looking for me, I'll be overnighting. Also for those persons who are traveling in from overseas, you want a nice, cozy place out of town, then Club Twilight, call them up, look them up on social media. They have their own Facebook page, and ensure that you come up the side and have a good time. Have a good time. Have a good time. I'm sorry. That's it.
You can get meat anywhere, but for the best cuts of chicken, beef, pork, mutton, and lots more, check out T&W Harris Butcher Shop, located in the East Rimeveld Market Meat Section. Call us on 609-7168, 641-4494. Ask for Rastaman. T&W Harris Butcher Shop for the best in fresh cut meats and lots more. Planning a party? Worry no more. We have all the supplies you need. At EC Party Rentals, we have folding chairs, folding tables, square tables, round tables, long tables, short tables, big tables. We have chairs, red chairs, gold chairs, white chairs, crystal chairs, chairs of all type, throne chairs. What you want, we have. Food warmers, coolers, ice, beverages. At EC Party Rentals, we have what you need to have a good time. You plan the party, we do the work. Call us 622-5933. EC Party Rentals. Let's keep your party going.
Went to a dance a Clarendon. Me and a big fat thing named Palm.
Club Twilight presents Sunday 26th January, the big people after lunch and oldies bacchanal. Yes, at Club Twilight, Sideline Dam, Buxton North. Music by Super Cat One Man Band, Cam's Audio, Disco Baby, and popular DJs. Check it out. It's the big people after lunch oldies bacchanal at Club Twilight. Sunday 26th January. It's gonna be a back in time movie.
Went to a dance a Clarendon. Me and a big fat thing named Palm.
Club Twilight presents Sunday 26th January, the big people after lunch and oldies bacchanal. Yes, at Club Twilight, sideline down Buxton North. Music by Supercat One Man Band, Cam's Audio, Disco Baby, and popular DJs. Check it out. It's the big people after lunch oldies bacchanal at Club Twilight. Sunday 26th January. It's gonna be a back in time movie.
What I need you guys to do is to invite them to let them come together. Let them
Morning, neighbor, morning. Morning, are you morning? Welcome to another program of Guyanese Morning Time. It is 18 minutes past the 7 o'clock hour on the 22nd day of January in the year 2025. I'm your host, Tidaki Amsterdam. How you been? How was your yesterday? How was your last night? How you sleep last night? You sleep good? Or you been twisting and turning and tossing? Were you at rat with your conscience? I always say if man and man got a problem, it's not so much of a problem compared to when man and his conscience got a problem. Because your conscience always with you, this body, you can't sleep. Have you been sleeping good recently? Or resting well? Do you feel rejuvenated? Have you rested and recuperated? How are you setting up for this challenge that lies ahead? How many of you went out to GCOM yesterday and show your support? In the continued call for biometrics and a clean voters list, how many of you? I've been taking me down a road of frank and open discourse yesterday. How many of you took the time to reflect on some of the things that I said? One man messaged me to say he was disappointed at my response to his question, what am I doing as a leader? Or what do I intend to do as a leader? Well, it's life, you know. Sometimes disappointments will come. I'm sorry if I fell short of your expectations. But I'm human. And there's sometimes when we just have to, you know, have issues discussed bare knuckles. And I'll tell you the truth. I really have no regret at having addressed the issues as I did yesterday. Because the reality is sometimes we need tough love. And tough love is love too. Sometimes you have to tell people as it is. You have to tell people as it is. And so they come to a place of understanding. And from that place of understanding, they will decide and determine in their own minds where they want to go to. So I personally have no apologies to make for that. I have no regret. And so on and so forth. Just as an example. Just as an example. And this might come across as crude because I don't know the best way to put it. Just as an example. Having spoken to you the way I spoke, well, having spoken with you the way I spoke with you yesterday, by the time I got off the program, there were 4 contributors to the Cash App. I'm not using Cash App as a measure of your support, etc. But there were 4 contributors to the Cash App. And for the last several weeks, I have said to you, I have not had 4 contributors to the Cash App. So when I look at that, I say, wait, are these people waiting for me to quote unquote cuss them out, speak harshly to them, beg them for them to play their part in making a financial contribution to the upkeep of the program and everything else that I do. Well, I tell you all this morning, if that is the attitude you expect from me, then it's not going to happen. Right? It's not going to happen. I've always heard, I've always heard people say, listen, black people are hard to deal with, you know. If you're hard with them, they don't, you know, come to realization of certain things. But it takes a lot out of people to beat up on other people, if you want to call it that. As a teacher, I used to tell my students, it pains me more when I whip you. You can't imagine the pain that I felt beating children to keep them in line as a teacher. It's a painful thing. And it pains you as an individual to have to be harsh with people. But being harsh isn't necessary at times. It is the only way some of us come to a realization, well, here, we're screwing up. Good? And so, my voice daughter said, you ever forgot what you were talking about yesterday? No, I didn't forget what I was talking about. I was talking about GCOM and its responsibilities and college dropping the ball and all of that. I didn't forget. But I think at the time, it was worth setting it aside to set the record straight. It was worth setting it aside to set the record straight. And again, I'm saying, I'm happy I did it. And I will continue to do it as long as it becomes necessary, because we have to come out of this slumber. People say, but Mr. Amsterdam, you know, we're overseas, and we can't join the protest line and so on and so forth. There's several options. You are overseas, in many instances, you have relatives here. Encourage them to join the protest line. If we have a representative of one person, every Guyanese overseas, if we have one representative on behalf of that person, we can get close to 1 million people on the streets. Trust me. Right? Because the population overseas is bigger than the population locally. Guyanese I'm talking about. If you give us half of a representative, the numbers are going to be nice to send a message to the people that need to get the messages. So is it just well and good to sit back and say, but we overseas? No. You have an interest in your country, you have an interest in what's happening to the citizens and your relatives and so on, then find ways and means of supporting the local struggle. Why do you think Israel could be as arrogant and as aggressive as it is, with no mind for the US, quite frankly? Because its citizens in the US embolden it, because they hold sway in elections and all kinds of things. They make themselves their power felt. You think the response of Palestine and this place and that place and Gaza and this and that, look at Haiti, for example. Go and check the history of how many times a Haitian president, for example, was either assassinated, attempted assassinated, or overthrown, and protests and so on developed in Haiti. The overseas-based Haitians were getting, I would say, downright dirty to achieve whatever goals they needed to achieve in that country to set things the way they think they should be set. So it's not good enough to just say, you know, we are overseas. Because this fight doesn't exclude you. And it doesn't exclude your relatives and friends and comrades who are here also. Encourage them to join the fight. Anyhow, it is 7:27, and it is Wednesday, so we have Professor David Hines in the house. And of course, we talk with Professor on Wednesdays. Like the vice notice said yesterday, sure David Hines is going to be on the program today, like I said. A good example of the fact that we are doing things. Because with certainty, you can look forward to David Hines on this program on Wednesdays to share wisdom, knowledge, understanding, whatever, to hold the government accountable. That's a part of what we are doing as leaders. Dr. Hines, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you.
How you do?
Wonderful.
Good. When you're doing wonderful, I feel good because wonderful. I like a wonderful mood. It's another Wednesday. Last week you were here. We had a good chat. And since then, several things developed. I know we had a budget on Friday. That would have been Friday after the Wednesday, which means that we've not had an opportunity to talk about the budget on CAMS TV, Chinese morning time. We also saw Khaled Singh, as I would say, making a final declaration that there ain't gonna be no biometrics. Because while the law permits it, or the law permits GCOM to so do, according to Khaled, there is not enough time. Good. And of course, there have been other developments in the country and so on. But I want us to start by talking about budget. As everybody, the budget is put in the air, like you see. The budget. I'm talking to you as leader of the Working People's Alliance with regard to the budget. I'm sure that you would have had the opportunity to listen and perhaps analyze the budget to some extent. Where does the party stand in terms of the measures announced by the minister within the ministry, the president, responsible for
Well, specifically what? The budget is a 5 hours budget. You're asking me to analyze the...
Well, you know,
you want me to talk?
I'm asking you for your point of view, and so basically I'm giving you the right to decide which aspects of the budget you want to comment on. For example, the biggest budget, $1 trillion, biggest budget in an oil economy. But pensioners are being granted what, a $5,000 more increase on what they're getting. The income tax ceiling has now gone to, ceiling has now gone to $130,000. Those kind of things. You would have the aspects of the budget, let me say, which affects the normal man, the regular man, the ordinary man.
Well, the entire budget affects the ordinary man. The ordinary man is a citizen, and the budget is the national budget. A budget is really what are you going to spend in the next year? How much you're going to spend? How are you dividing the expenditures? And of course, how much you intend to bring in, you know? So the budget is a very important document. And if you're talking about expenditures, if you're talking about how much you're going to spend in a given year, you have to, first of all, identify what are the priorities of the country. What needs to be fixed? What are the things that are most urgent over the next year in order to keep the country going? You know, Guyana is a post-plantation society, meaning that it's a country that was saddled with more than 300 years of enslavement and colonialism. It meant that when we came out of independence, we came out with certain chronic problems. The problem of poverty is really a holdover from the long years of bondage. And that problem has persisted to this day. One of the biggest impediments to development in a place like Guyana is the continuing poverty. The poverty is now pegged at 48% by the international organizations. What it means is that half of your population lives in poverty. And the poverty line in that report is $5.50 US per day. People live on that. And as I was telling my class yesterday, I asked, you take $5.50, and it's a slice of pizza. Young people like pizza, and so we use that example. On campus, a slice of pizza is about $5, $5 by the time you put in taxes and so on. So imagine what you're spending to buy a slice of pizza is what half of a country lives on, less than that. So it's a persistent problem in a place like Guyana, poverty. And as I said, it's an impediment to high cost of living, to development. It has been holding us back all the time. Prior, and that 48%, it has come down in the last decade. At the beginning of the decade, it was 60%. So in 10 years, poverty only decreased by 12%, which is not a fast pace. The poverty has been decreasing by 1% per year in the last decade. So it's a serious problem. Then we have the clear and present problem of cost of living. You live in Guyana. The first thing people will tell you, food gone up, food price gone up. I can't afford the prices for things, price for food, price for this, price for that. So it's a clear and present danger in the country. The high cost of living. One of the things that we brought out of colonialism is education. Education has been a problem in the sense that we have a high dropout rate. 50%. Half of our school children are dropping out of school. They start at Form 1, by the time they get to Form 5, half of them not in school. At one point, we used to be a relatively literate country. Well, not a relatively literate country, very literate. I mean, the literacy rate in Guyana was comparable to big countries. In fact, it was above big countries. We had a literacy rate of 90%. And that has been eroded over time. At one time, there was a study that showed that almost 90% of our young people, 50 to 24, were functionally illiterate. Which means they could barely read and write. So we have a problem of illiteracy, or literacy, however you want to put it. We have a problem of school dropout. We have a problem where our best teachers are leaving our country, going overseas, because they're not being paid well here. And they're not going to, most of them are not going to America or England. They're going just next door to our Caribbean neighbors. So when you put those big problems together, your best teachers leave in because they're not being paid properly. School dropout high. Literacy low, illiteracy high. You're talking about a grave problem in our education system. So I give those three examples of education, cost of living, poverty, to say that if you are preparing a budget, those things have to become priority, because an uneducated nation is going to be an unproductive nation. It is going to be a nation that is not going to have the skills to earn a lot of money. And that is at the heart of development. An uneducated nation is not going to be is not going to lead to development. An impoverished nation is not going to lead to development. A nation in which people can't afford food and other things in the market is a big problem. People are going to either migrate, and those who can't migrate, they live in abject poverty. Poverty then leads to all kinds of deviant behavior. So you're talking about persistent underdevelopment. And now you have landed on a windfall. You now got more money, because one of the problems we have had in the past is that we didn't have the revenue, we didn't have the money to take care of those problems in an adequate way. We don't have that problem now. So if you're putting together a budget, you're asking, if your outcome is that you want your country to develop, you're asking, how can I use this budgetary allocation to tackle the impediments to development? Now, you know, poverty and people can't afford the cost of living and education are only three. But you know, you have health, you have infrastructure, you have a whole range of things, because we are an underdeveloped country. So it means that our multiple sectors will have to be tackled. So the challenge of preparing a budget is, what are your priorities? What are your priorities? Are you going to say, look, I'm going to spend 50% of the money in the budget on infrastructure because I want good roads and bridges and so on? Well, okay. If you feel that is your priority, and you don't care whether the country becomes educated, you don't care whether people can afford to live in the country, you don't care whether your teachers and your public servants and your engineers are leaving, you don't care about getting people out of poverty, then your priority is infrastructure. So you spend 55% of the budget on infrastructure. But if your priority is much more balanced. You're going to say, boy, I got a $1.3 trillion. And I feel that if the country is to develop, we have to be even-handed in terms of our priorities. We want good infrastructure because we want to attract investment. We want educated people because that also would attract investment. If people feel you have an educated workforce, they're going to come. We want to keep our best people at home, so we've got to pay better wages. We want to get poor people out of poverty, so we've got to find ways and means of spending on things that will alleviate poverty. And boy, you know, this cost of living story is hell. You know, the markets are wreaking havoc. And we in the government, we can't control the market, but there's some things that we can do to help people to alleviate the high cost of living. We can pay them better wages so that they get more direct disposable money in their pockets. We can spend money to help the producers of goods and services to produce those goods and services at a low cost. And so the prices, when they get to the market, would be lowered. And, you know, so we want to tackle this cost of living thing at two ends. At the end of getting direct disposable income into people's hands, and also helping the producers to lower the cost of production so that they can lower the prices in the market. We have a lot of old people in the country. People are now living longer. People 100 and this year, 100 and that year. You notice every day, you open the paper, somebody's 100 and odd. People are living longer. If you say you're getting old at 55, because that's when people retire from the public service. And if you live to 95, that's 40 years you're living as old people. So, you know, and a lot of our old people, their only income is old age pension. So old age pension then becomes a priority, because if we have enough money to give to old people old age pension, it would ensure that our old people don't become much of a burden and that they can live reasonably well in their old age. So we have all these problems. Are we going to solve one problem, the problem of infrastructure, at the expense of solving all the other problems? Or are we going to try to use the money in an even way so that we are tackling the multiple problems in the society? And if you're going to tackle the multiple problems in the society, as most sensible economists will tell you, or politicians who care tell you, then your budget is going to reflect that. Your budget is going to reflect that. And so your expenditures would be much more even-handed. And then even when you go to education, you know, all right, you give education $170-something million. That sounds good. That sounds good. But what are you spending it on? Are you spending it on more school buildings? Or are you going to spend some on school buildings spend some on wages because your teachers are leaving, they're striking on you, you know. So you want to make wages a priority, because if you make wages a priority, you're keeping your teachers and you're making sure they don't strike every 2 mornings on you. 50% of your children are dropping out. Why? You're going to spend money on ensuring that those children come to school? What are they? Why are they dropping out? And what are they doing when they drop out? Are they dropping out to school to go and help the parents sell in the market and go and hustle on anything? All right. So are you going to give money to the parents or ensure the parents earn enough so they don't have to take their children out to school to go and sell newspaper or go and sell plantain chip? Okay, so if that is the case, why not put a universal basic income and give to your citizens and attach to it and say, we are giving this basic income, in turn, we are requesting you to send your children to school. All around the world where they give universal basic income and they tag school attendance to it, you see school attendance shoot up. So I'm giving all of this to say, to my mind, as someone who's not an economist, but someone who understands the relationship between economics and development, economics and politics, to say that if you're going to prepare a budget, your budget has to speak to the problems in your society. It has to speak to the impediments to development. And so when I look at this budget, that's the gaze that I am putting on the budget. That's the gaze the WPA is putting on the budget. We look to see how the budget speaks to easing the burden of poverty on half of our population, half. And if we were to raise the poverty line and to say the poverty line is people who earn $10 per day or less, or if we were to put the poverty line, if we were to put the poverty line at $10 or less, that poverty rate would go up to 60%. So in effect, the poverty rate is at 48% because, to my mind, the poverty line is very low. 550 US is 1,100 Guyana dollars. And if you double that to 2,000 Guyana dollars per day, it's still, people will still be in poverty. So to my mind, the poverty rate in Guyana is higher than 48%. It's only at 48% because you peg the line at 550 US, which is 1,100 Guyana dollars. But if you really say, look, what you need, how much people need to live on a day, reasonably, you will find that poverty line would have to go up. Because I guess, I think it will take the average Guyanese, given the cost of living and all the other things, it will take the average Guyanese about a minimum of $4,000 to $5,000 per day to say that you can survive on that. And so therefore, when you are looking at the budget, you're looking to see what is in the budget that's going to help people to beat poverty. What in the budget is there to help people to deal with the high cost of living? What is there in the budget that is going to pay public servants and people in the private sector, workers in the private sector and the public sector? What is it going to take for them to stay in Guyana and make sure we have the requisite skills? And when we look at the budget has failed. It has failed in terms of helping people to meet the high cost of living. It has failed in putting things there that is going to, in a structural way, help people to begin to beat poverty and bring down that poverty rate from 48%. When we look at the budget, what is there that is going to help us to deal with the chronic problems in education, illiteracy, high school dropout, keeping our teachers by paying them better wages? Not very much. Not very much. And so therefore, this budget does not speak to the real problems in Guyana and does not speak to the removing the impediments to development. And when we talk about development, development is not just infrastructural development, but human development. If you develop your roads and your bridges and you don't develop your people, you're not going to have development. There cannot be development without human development. And this budget does not tackle the problem of human development. And so therefore, for us, the budget suffers from focus. It suffers from not tackling the real problems in the society. $55% of the budget is spent on infrastructure. Does that money, 55% of 1.3 trillion, that is more than half, does that money trickle down into the hands of poor people? No. That money trickles into the hands of the big contractors. So the priority of the government is to ensure money gets to the rich. And we know when we say the rich, it's not even rich across the line, across the board. It's rich who are close to the PPP. These little things, raise the threshold to 130. The tax threshold, small. Raise old age pension by $5,000. Little thing. Giving $100,000 to babies that are not born. A little freak. A little cash grant here, a little freak. When you add up all those things, a little 40,000 because we care. When you add up all those things, the do not amount to any critical amount of money in the hands of poor people to help them to deal with cost of living in the first place, and to help them to begin the crawl out of poverty. And that is the test of any budget. In the final analysis, do these little things that the budget is, little sweeteners, little sweeteners, rather than a comprehensive package that has a particular outcome in mind. The outcome of this budget is clear. Get money into the hands of the rich and get the PPP elected. By fooling people with a little bit of money here, a little bit of 10,000 here, 30,000 here, 40,000 here. $100,000 cash grant. Yeah. People are fighting for it, as we notice, because it will help them to now be able to buy more greens in the market for a week or two. So people are fighting for it. You'll be able to buy a pair of sneakers for each child. And by the time they swing around, the $100,000 done. So the $100,000 does not help them to beat cost of living. It's a temporary relief for a week or two. It certainly doesn't help them to get out of poverty. What are you going to do with $100,000? Can you take it and invest in a small business? Can you go with $100,000 to the bank and borrow money against it so that you can build a proper house? No. So the budget focuses on mamagaing people, as the Trinidadians would say, fooling people. You get excited, boy, you're going to get a little raise, and then the little raise, within a week, it's gone. So you're fooling people. And you're hoping that people will get excited about it and vote for you at the election. So the outcome that they're looking for from this budget is to fool people with the hope that people will then vote for them at the next election. And the next outcome is, of course, making sure that their friends, who they're depending on to finance their campaign for the election. So you give the big contractor build the roads, and they take a quarter of the money that they're making and they donate it to Freedom House. So you end up giving yourself back money. It's a way of giving money to the party by passing it through their friends. It's a kind of budgetary, monetary money laundering. It's a kind of money laundering that the PPP is into. Giving money to themselves because they will get bribes as individuals, as we heard from the Sugate, and then the party is bribing also because the party is getting some of the money. And so that is what this budget is about. $5,000 for old people. $5,000 a month. 30 days in the month. 31 days in the month. Divide them. Divide $5,000 by 31 or 30. And you will see what people in effect are getting is about $16 or $17 per day raise. That's what old people are getting, if my math is correct. Yeah, well, no, 200. It'll be
166, 67. If you divide by 30 days.
Yes, 160. It's about $160 per day. Maybe no $160 can barely maybe buy a sweet drink. So the raise the old people are getting is a sweet drink per day. Whatever $160 can buy. What can $160 buy? We know, we younger people know it can't buy a beer. Those of us who don't drink sweet drink. But if you're drinking sweet drink, I think the sweet drink price is about $200. So basically, your raise that you're giving to old people is a sweet drink per day. That's the raise. When you break down the big number and you bring it down, that's what they are getting. $30 days per month, $200, come up to $6,000. And you're not getting $6,000, it's $5,000, so it's below $200. So it's about $160, $170. So this is a very depressing budget from the standpoint of ordinary people, because we're talking about those who are at the lower bracket, but there are those who are in the middle bracket who are not much better than those at the lower bracket. So there's not much in the budget for the majority of people in Guyana, and that is most depressing. For a country that is earning the amount of money that we are earning, it is depressing what this budget is giving to ordinary people.
Of course, there are many promises in the budget, given the fact that it's an election year budget. There are lots of promises. $100,000 one-off for newborn babies. $10,000 healthcare grant and stuff like that, voucher. But let's see where these things will materialize, when they will materialize.
They're not going to materialize. We don't have to wait and see. When you add all of that together, it does not help people to deal with the cost of living. It'll give them a relief for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Like if you get $100,000, a poor man, $100,000, by the time you swing around and buy 2 things in the market that you really need, or you pay back a debt that you have, the $100,000 gone. It's a 1 week, 2 week relief. That's what it is. That's what it is.
The question there, especially with the newborn babies grant, is whether or not you see that as a relief. Well, because the first guy make a baby to get it.
Look, I know something about thing. I have, a grandchild. I have godchildren, and when I go home to Guyana, I would buy baby clothes for them, because baby clothes are expensive in Guyana. And $100,000 is 500 Guyanese dollars, American dollar. And when I buy in clothes to carry home for my grandchild, it's over $500 I spend on buying clothes. So $100,000 to a newborn baby is to buy your first round of clothes. That's it. You begin to talk about baby food. I don't buy diapers and all them kind of thing. Just the clothes. And I know it costs more than $500. So I know that practically. So when you talk about $100,000 to a newborn, giving a parent of a newborn baby, basically that's $100,000 to buy the first set of clothes for the baby. Nothing else. Nothing else. I am not a woman who make a baby, but like I said, I have the practical experience of buying baby clothes for grandchildren and godchildren.
Okay, guys. That was on the budget. I know we can go on and on and on and on the budget, but let's talk a bit about the most recent decision at GCOM, given the fact that we're months away from an election. For years, people have been asking for a clean voters list, and then we added biometrics to the call. We saw Khaled Singh vacillating. I want to say every time they have a meeting and this thing comes up is a different reason, including the promise to consult with stakeholders whether or not they decide on biometrics. But mostly recently, in the last week or so, we heard the quote-unquote definitive pronouncement that despite the ROPA giving GCOM the right to implement those things which are necessary to present a free, fair, credible election, and biometrics basically can be considered cover under that right. Khaled Singh has said, listen, while we recognize that we have the right, we have the authority, we can do it, we are not going to do it because, number one, we have to consult with stakeholders, we have to acquire equipment, we have to teach, and time doesn't permit. I know for a fact that as leader of WPA and so on, well as presidential candidate of WPA, co-leader, you certainly have been tracking these things. What is the party's position on these most recent pronouncements?
I've been tracking it not just as co-leader and presidential candidate, as a scholar, as a citizen, and so on. But you're asking for the WPA's position. And, our position is that, look, these matters have been before GCOM for the better part of 5 years. And at GCOM tackled these problems early, they would have been done, and certainly those of us who are calling for it would have been happy, and GCOM would have been ready for a go. GCOM, as you said, the chair, because she has the casting vote, one side said no biometrics, the other side said biometrics. She with the casting vote was critical. And that she put this matter on the agenda 3 years ago, 2 years ago, all those things that she listed there could have been accomplished with ease. Go to the National Assembly, pass the necessary legislation so that ROPA does not collide with the Constitution, right? Then you go and you buy your equipment and you do all the other things that you do with ease. Take your time. She waited until a few months before the elections and then say, this thing could be done, but we don't have enough time to do it. That's campishness. That is campishness. You willingly, knowingly, deliberately drag your feet Even when you pronouncing it 3 months ago, it takes you 3 months to give your ruling. Had you given your ruling 3 months ago, you would have had a full year. So she has scammed the system knowingly and deliberately. But you now are a few months. The point is, GCOM's remit is to ensure that we have credible elections. And if GCOM is saying that biometrics is credible, it's going to help with credible elections, and we know that because it's being used in other parts of the world, if you're saying that it's saying, then that should be your concern.
Hello, good morning. Hi. How y'all doing? I miss y'all, man. It's long. I ain't see you. So I been all the time. Morning, neighbor, morning. Welcome to another program of Guyanese Morning Time. I am your host, Kidaki Amsterdam. It is 7 hours 30 on the 23rd day of January in the year 2025. How you been? How was your yesterday? How is your today? How are you doing? What do you expect out of today? What are your plans for today? Talk to me. Let me know.
You know, for a few months.
How you been? Good, so I verify that we're getting sound. Today is Thursday. Today is the day when St. Jordan is going to be in the house. And I know you're going to be giving the PPP belly aches. Well, this morning, Mr. Jordan is going to give the people belly ache. I am almost sure about that because what? There's a numbers man and he's taking his time to examine the numbers. Unlike me, I ain't got too much interest in the numbers. I got interest in what happening behind the numbers. And we've discussed that earlier in the week and so on. Mr. Jordan.
Hello.
Good morning, sir. How you do?
Good morning. Not too bad. Not
you
too
sound
bad.
buoyant, boy. You sound excited to destroy this budget.
I thought I had been doing that all week and last week.
All right, good. So here we go. It's another Thursday. Welcome to the program. And as usual.
Thank you. As usual, it's thankful Thursday. Sun is shining. The weather is sweet. You know.
You plagiarizing Bob Marley there, boy?
No, I merely picking up Bob Marley.
Okay, I just checking, you know. You have friends in government who like plagiarize people. You like the billboard like you sing your word, boy?
I tell you here, there are certain phrases and adjectives that are used for such behavior that we perhaps can't use here. But if you want to use classic examples of those things, check on that billboard. You know, the kissing of the posterior is very, very well advertised. I tell you what, nowhere else in the world can you go, not even in Trump MAGA countries, perhaps, can you go and see this craziness.
Well, I guess everybody's saying I invited somebody decides to shout from a distance. We love you, Trump.
That's the length to which you're going to feel appreciated, to want to feel appreciated.
Why not?
That's, you know, I mean, because I can't fathom what is the reason behind it. Is it as a means of telling Trump how much you love him so that he will come to your rescue if Venezuela attempts to invade? Is it telling you how much you love him so that he will come to your rescue if the bad opposition behaves bad during the election? What is the purpose of it? You know, I have never seen a billboard hailing up any CARICOM prime minister, any Commonwealth prime minister, or any such thing. Not even the British prime minister, the Canadian prime minister, or any such. Not even the Indian prime minister. You know, I guess.
Remember, those people are not in that shithole country, according to Trump. You know.
I tell you, look, I think the lengths to which we have degraded in culture, both Bornum and Jagon, you know, Well, one must be torn in the graves, and one's ashes must be flying somewhere over the rainbow, really, But this is the lengths to which we have degenerated. Yes, that's what has happened. Degenerated. We have lost all sense of consciousness, reasoning, culture, and everything else, But for those followers and soup drinkers and everybody else who want their whole identity to be subsumed in this nonsense, then they can go ahead. For us whose foreparents have slaved to build this country and so on, I think it's about time that a re-education takes place, so that, because a conscious mind is a healthy mind. An unconscious mind is the one that would put such a billboard prominently and a roundabout, at a time when I would imagine you getting billions and billions and billions, you control billions and billions of dollars. And instead of telling people about the dangers of Venezuela invading or the lesser of the two nemesis, Suriname and their foolishness, you got billboard with Trump, President Trump, somebody who couldn't care three less about you, don't even know about you, couldn't care three less about you, and you got enough problems to worry about when he starts sending all those illegals and so forth that you have there. When you compound that with the illegals coming from Venezuela and all other places, have you thought about it? Have you prepared for it and so forth?
Mr. Jordan, I am sure the PPP would be glad for their illegals to be sent back, because they really and truly need that quote-unquote population boost to boost their chances of winning this election,
I have no doubt in what you're saying. But on the other side, I just indicating the immediate problems that can create, because America has a tendency to send back all those who are criminally minded or who have had some criminal past, however minor.
Yeah.
Because America sends you back even for spitting or immoral behavior, so it doesn't have to be of a high criminal intent like murder or wounding and so on. If you jump a turnstile in America and you are a non-immigrant, you can be heading back for home. So all kinds will be coming back, and as to whether they are conscious enough to worry about voting and so on is a different matter.
That's true.
It's a different matter. But before we head into our, I hope, interactive discussion this time, I hope you're going and start chipping up the greens.
I was actually planning to leave you alone.
That's all right. I know that usually happens.
Because this is you think this is budget. I don't want to break your flow. You understand?
No, I know you don't want to break your flow, but sometimes interactive, sometimes a question or two that might have been bothering your audience, because remember, I don't see the comments. And,
okay.
And also, as you went about in your communities and so on, more and more questions might have been asked. And so this might be the opportune time to get it. But I agree in general, you could go and cut up the greens and so on, then you could just buzz when you come back and so.
All right.
Now, before we get into that, though, I just quickly want to address a comment made by Jack Dio at his last press conference last week. You see, unlike others, I even though I don't listen to the press conference, every so often a point comes up in these clips, and when it do and it concerns me or the coalition, I intend to immediately fire back on it. And I saw a clip in which he was suggesting, well, not suggesting, he was saying openly, and I believe for the umpteenth time, that after the no confidence motion in 2018, the coalition was involved in illegal and unlawful spending right up to August the 2nd. Now, this craziness, this nonsense, had started and made its first appearance back in as early as September of 2020, when Nandalal, of all people, came out with it first. And then Jagdeo picked up the cudgels and so on, and the two of them in particular were the ones who was putting this thing out in the public domain to give the impression that we were involved in illegal and unlawful spending. And they like to say spending that was not approved by the parliament, so to speak. And I remembered that as far back as that same September 2020, I had cause to send a letter to the Stablic News. In fact, it's September the 7th, 2020, I sent a letter to Stablic News on the issue of that legality of the spending. But the earlier part was one where he said that in 2019, for example, we have been spending illegally. Look, let us, I went through this, I think, on Sunday, and I could go back it again, and I will go out again 1,000 times. It was to the credit of the coalition that we had started since 2017 budget to produce budgets before the start of the fiscal year. That is how budgets must be produced. Not after the start of the fiscal year, before the start of the fiscal year. So you have a whole year to implement the budget. And we had done so. And as such, the 2019 budget was approved, was presented, passed, and approved in the National Assembly in December of 2018, days before the debate on the no confidence motion. Days before. So that we had a whole 2019 budget already in place and ready to go from January 1 of 2019. So that when the no confidence motion came, it's not a case that we were floundering as to how we're going to be spending. And no confidence motion didn't negate the budget. The budget was already approved and passed in Parliament.
Yes,
so
also,
we were legal.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was about to say also, even if that budget wasn't passed, the law provides so what 78 of the previous budget to be spent?
No. If that budget wasn't passed, we were going to be up that creek.
Okay.
Really, because we would not have had a continuous basis of spending, especially after March.
Mm-hmm.
March of 2019. So I think it was foresight, vision, and everything else that allowed us to have a budget, a legitimate budget in place. All right. So we had that budget in place, and we could spend that budget, and in accordance with the budget, and most of all, notwithstanding the no confidence motion, as they said on Sunday, the Parliament remained open. The Parliament was not dissolved. There's nothing in the Constitution that says with the passage of a no confidence motion, the Parliament shuts down. In fact, even the CCJ admitted that notwithstanding the passage of no confidence motion, the government existed. After all, a country must have a government. It's just the nature of the government may change.
Uh-huh.
But a country has to have a government. And as I said, a brilliant person like Barton, who was the speaker at the time, right, a man with a PhD, or a force speaker with a PhD in law, had he any inclination and reading of the law that says with the passage of no confidence motion, the Parliament came to an end, he would have ended the Parliament there and then. But in reality, the Parliament met back again in early January, I think the 2nd or 3rd of January or the 4th of January. And in that Parliament, we passed all the budget measures. We passed all the budget measures for 2019, and measures which are still in place up to today, including those relating to the Procurement Act, the measures in relation to the procurement legislation. Those are still in force and are being used to blacklist contractors and so on. Those are the regulations that were supposedly passed in this Parliament that should not have existed. And when it's convenient to the PPP, the Parliament was okay. And when it's inconvenient, the Parliament is not. Because it is the very same PPP who told us that we must go to the Parliament because it's still open and pass monies for GCOM so that they could hold the elections. And as a result, in May of 2019, we went to the Parliament and passed money for GCOM, a supplementary provision. So you can see when it's thing for them, it's okay. When the parliament was dissolved on December the 31st, I think it was, of 2019, another section of the constitution would have kicked in. And in fact, I just want to quickly let the viewers know, and perhaps yourself, that parliamentary approval is not needed, or prior parliamentary approval for spending is not needed in 4 circumstances as set out in the Constitution, the highest and supreme law of this country. The Constitution, not no subsequent law that we made. The Constitution sets out 4 instances when you don't need prior approval, parliamentary approval for spending. And the fourth and critical one in relation to the elections is when the parliament is dissolved, right? As when the parliament was dissolved in December, I think December 31st, 2019. GCOM had written a letter earlier prior to the dissolution asking how will they be financed? How will they be financed after December 31st, 2019? And in writing to us, the GCOM chairman actually sent a copy of a cabinet decision that was made under the previous administration in respect of authority to spend. When in reality, the Constitution had already provided, and they didn't need a cabinet decision to spend, giving them the authority to spend, or such authority. It was already in the Constitution, and I could quote you I can quote you with the relevant section of the Constitution. It says that when the parliament is dissolved, Article 219(3) authorizes the Minister of Finance to withdraw such sums from the consolidated fund that are considered necessary for the purpose of meeting expenditure on the public services until the expiry of 3 months, commencing with the date on which the National Assembly first meets after the dissolution. So what all that means is that, look, once a parliament is dissolved, the Minister of Finance under the Constitution, Article 219(3), is authorized to withdraw sums that are adequate and sufficient for running the government. And note carefully in its construct, it doesn't say that they're authorized to withdraw 1/3, 1/4, 1/4, 1/8, and all these kinds of things. It says the Minister of Finance is authorized to withdraw such sums as are sufficient for running the government. And this can continue until 3 months after the parliament meets after its first dissolution. So what does this mean in relation to the 2020 election? The parliament was dissolved on December the 31st, 2019. And the parliament met again on September the 1st, 2020. So spending could continue from January 1, 2020, up until not the 1st of September, but 3 months after the 1st of September. So that will make it September, October, November, until the end of November. After which you have to have a budget in place, a budget that has been presented and passed. You have to have that in place. So a budget would have had to be in place by the 1st of December or towards the end of November 2020. That is in accordance with Article 219(3). And that article goes on to state that a statement of all the expenditure that would have been made during that period must be laid in the National Assembly. And when this expenditure is approved, it shall form part of the appropriation bill. It shall form part of the next appropriation bill. So the coalition government had spent $180 billion between January 1, 2020 and August 2nd, 2020. Well, we were not in power. We were kicked out. A new government was installed. So it is the new government that has to bring that expenditure to the parliament separately. And when it's approved, it's included in the appropriation bill. Everybody knows, or if they remember, that the then government had resisted doing this until they were threatened with legal action. So that is the critical instance in relation to the elections to show that we had legal authority to spend. I wanted to go out there because I've been raising this matter every time they bring it. And this is the important, they will bring it again. Because they don't have no decency where these matters are concerned. Right? You consistent here didn't talk about 200 taxes. And when you ask them to name the 200 taxes, they hide under some cloak and dagger. They persistently talk about 7,000 workers who were fired. And when you point to the international study that was done, showing that that was false, they will continue it because they feel that their supporters. It is important for the supporters to continue having this thing etched onto their memory. And that if they were to pull back, they will then be deemed to be liars, and what next? So it's legal, it's constitutional. Now there are 3 other aspects under the Constitution in which you don't need prior parliamentary approval. The second one is when a budget is presented and approved after the start of the financial year, as is taking place right now. The only authority the present government has for spending come January 1 until a budget has been approved and assented to and so on, is the Constitution. Because no budget is in place. They are approving budget after the start of the fiscal year. But they are saved by Article 219(1), which says that the Minister of Finance can withdraw funds from the consolidated fund for a period up to 4 months. Okay, and that is consistent with the other part of the Constitution, which says that you must present a budget no later than 90 days in the new year. So when it's not a leap year, that will take you to, that will be what, 41 and 28, 59. And so that will take you right down to the end of March when it's not a leap year. And the 30th of March when there's a leap year. You'll have to have a budget in the parliament by that date. And that budget must be approved no later than April. That's the 4 months you get in which you can spend without a budget being in place. And that is what they are relying on right now. The Fiscal Management and Accountability Act start to give further, going down in some granular details, expounding on this particular part. And that act provides for 1/12. During that period, spending will be limited to 1/12 of the previous year's expenditure. That's how you get this story about 1/12, right? It's very nebulous, and very arbitrary, because as you well know, expenditure don't go by 1/12. Not even salaries go by 1/12, right? Salaries go up and down, up and down. If you just take 1/12 of what happened last year, and if you, for example, brought on new people late last year, and they have to have a full year salary in January, and let's say a number of people, let's say you bring on 200 recruits late in January, and you got to pay them late in December last year, and you have to pay them in January. 1/12 of last year's provision will not allow you to pay those people. and so on. So the 112 is very arbitrary, but in the absence of a better formula, the 112 has remained in the law. So that is the law that is keeping the Minister of Finance on the legal side in relation to now bringing a budget and having it passed in February, because at the rate at which they are going to be doing debates starting from tomorrow, and then debating on the estimates, which is another 4 to 5 days, and so on, that will carry down into February. And then the third instance is where the amount that has been appropriated in any budget is insufficient, or where monies have been expended for any purpose in excess of the amount appropriated for that purpose. So in other words, then you get what called shortfall. Shortfall. You had a quotation, for example, for a car, right? You had a quotation, say, in July, and so you have to wait for a budget that is being passed in February of next year. But that same amount for the quotation is put in the budget. But when you go to purchase the car, the dealer says, well, look, this car has gone up by another 1,000 US, right? And so what you do, you purchase the car and so on, and then you take the shortfall or a statement of excess to the parliament. You get approval, and then you write the accounts. So the Constitution provides for statement of excess or any shortfalls being sent to the Parliament. And finally, the last one, of course, is the one that most people are familiar with. It's called the contingency fund. Okay? The contingency fund has been created by law, and it's a sub-fund of the consolidated fund. And Article 221 of the Constitution gives the Minister of Finance the authority to make advances for the contingency fund once they meet certain criteria of emergency. And if I don't do it, it's going to result in, deleterious circumstances happening or damage beyond and so on. So it is the Minister of Finance that makes that determination, all right, after listening to requests and so forth. And ultimately, of course, is the cabinet who will decide, because you cannot send a financial bill to the parliament without the stamp of the cabinet, right? So Article 221 provides for that, and Article 222 of the Constitution provides for the replenishment of the contingency fund. The contingency fund operates like a petty cash fund that in the small businesses, petty cash, right? There's a fund called petty cash, and it operates as a
Impress.
Right, Impress also, right? Impress or petty cash, and it operates as a sub fund of the main cash book. And so you replenish it steady back to the original sum, right? You set up a sum, whether it's $1,500, or in the case of the contingency fund, it might be a couple $2 billion. And as you spend out of it, you get approval, and then you replenish it again from the main cash book or the bank account, or in this case, the consolidated fund. And so those are the four instances that you can spend without prior parliament approval. Okay, those are the four instances, and they are in the Constitution, the supreme law. So every time you hear henceforth the rubbish that is going to be sent, especially at it is ratcheted up in this silly season, you will just suck your teeth and say, we hear the one before, that it has been well and properly explained by the former minister. And as they continue like this, believability must be a point in voter decision. Because
Well, let's see. Let's see.
Yeah.
Speak. Yes. Song
Yeah.
is back.
Song is back. Okay, good, good. Thanks to our viewers, because I will be talking to myself and talking in the dark.
Yeah, you know.
Oh,
It's just
yeah.
about the 2 minutes, though. I notice it's about 2 minutes.
Okay. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yes. So this large, if I said, if I had this kind of money and we were in the coalition government, any government to be, as a matter of fact, any government in their last year, and had the good fortune of doing not 5 budgets as should have been the case, but 6 budgets. And the last budget should have been a budget that would set the stage for my next term in government. Instead, here you have an individual presenting a budget that is not grounded in any national development plan. And like I said last week, I think it was, or the week before, that these people had voted down in Parliament their own national development strategy. So this budget is not grounded in any national development plan, right? Hence my term hodgepodge, because it is just a scenario where people wakes up, decide that something has to do, and then you put it in the budget. Okay? On this morning, I was reading where the response coming out of the Exim Bank is seeming to indicate that no feasibility study was done for that project. They put it for which they have given a loan, but they have given the loan on the basis of their technical and environmental studies that they have done, but no feasibility or financial study was done for the entire project. That is the kind of situation that we find ourselves with how our monies are being spent. So you have a budget coming out in the last year prior to general elections in which you don't get the sense of where these people said they were going to put us at the end of their term, of this term. You don't get the sense of some of the challenges that they might have got in bringing us to where we are and why we couldn't achieve. You don't get the sense of a setting of the stage for the next term, because they are going to be going to the electorate. They're going to go to the electorate with a whole set of promises and so on. You don't get a sense where the country will be by 2030, which is the next 5-year period and so on. Which is what the last budget will attempt to do. Instead, what you had 5 hours and 10 minutes or thereabouts, most of which was occupied in abusing out the opposition, about who didn't do this and what they didn't do and so on. A lot of it that didn't even make much sense. And I will come to some of it, because we can't deal with every one of it in this program. A lot of it that didn't make much sense. A lot of it was a bunch of lies, telling the same thing over and over again, a Goebbelian kind of approach, and hoping that it will become truth. And this is what I was moved to say, that the opposition, and I don't know about coalition anymore, I just got to call it opposition because I heard the coalition, they're on, what is it, Tom? Life support. No, sad reality. But yes, so the opposition has a very important gift that has been given to them in terms of them going to town on this budget. It has already started, and I hope they see the feedback because they have been able to attack this budget for what it is, a 1.386 waste of precious resources at a time when we should be rejoicing. How can a country got 5 new discoveries as announced in the budget of 2025, 5 new oil discoveries, and these are not made known? A far cry from 2015, 2016, and beyond, when discoveries, each new discovery of oil was met with even more optimism and euphoria. How can we move from that state of optimism and hope and jiggle and dance to one where we are hopeless, to one where the government is forced to hide the new discoveries because it either is going to create new angst or new demands or new rising expectations? That is what has happened. It is just a mere footnote in the speech in passing that 5 new discoveries of oil were made last year. We don't know how much. We don't know the quality. All of this was said to us when discoveries were made. All these fancy jargons of net pay and how many feet down they had to go down to find this oil, all this, it didn't mean much to us. But we were smiling because it meant more oil added to the kitty. But this was hidden. This was hidden from us. And you have to ask the question, why? Why was it hidden to us? Why was it just mentioned in passing? Why? And it all boils down to the whole situation that the government has found itself in. One in which increasing numbers of the population are disenchanted, disaffected with the government and their policies. They have given policies a bad name. They have given the word policies a bad name. And they have equally given the word planning a bad name. Hence the word hodgepodge. There's no vision in this budget. There's no vision. There's no financial management of these resources. One has to only check at the deficit that the government is running up. Another $378 billion deficit added to the debt last year. Another 320 billion more to be added this year. It's probably going to be greater because they have a partial for supplementary provisions during the year. But like I said, I get ahead of myself. The budget has its usual traits, notwithstanding. What are these traits? It's a budget. It's a budget that is claimed to be the biggest ever. And as I have indicated on many, many occasions, unless you have an earthquake or a hurricane or some major natural disaster, it is expected that budgets will be bigger than the year before. So this moniker about biggest budget ever, I think it is worn thin, and it does the government more a disservice than a service. Because it also seems to signal that bigger is better. That bigger is better. But that's not necessarily so. Bigger doesn't speak to efficiency. Bigger doesn't speak to productivity. And you get the sense that efficiency and productivity are not buzzwords within this government. Because you often will hear a situation where, for example, Ali will use a nominal increase from, say, 2015 when or 2019 when the coalition left to 2024 when they come in. Without appreciating that if you do that, it doesn't take either context or circumstance into all the relative strengths into play. How do you compare a non-oil budget that characterized the period 2015 to 2019 with oil budgets, not small oil budgets, massive oil budgets of 2020 to 2025? How do you do that comparison effectively? One effective way is to use relative shares, but they don't do that. They don't do relative shares. They give you nominal increase. So they will tell you, for example, that pension, the coalition government pension in 2019 was 20,500. But that they increase it to 41,000 in 2025. 100% increase. 100 sounds really great. 100% increase. But what they will not be able to tell you is that $20,500 was given when the budget was about $300 billion. And they are giving you $41,500 when the budget is $1.4 trillion. Their budget is nearly 5 times as much as the 2019 budget, but then they are crowing about giving you a 100% increase in pension. 5 times ours, or a percent increase of about 400% or thereabout. But they are crowing about giving the poor a 100% increase in pension that moves from 20,500 to 41,000, less than half of their own minimum wage. Less than half than their own minimum wage, which is approximately half of it was approximately $53,000 or thereabout. And you're crowing about 41,000. But that in any case, you're crowing about a $5,000 leap from 2024 when it was 36,000 to 41,000 in 2025. When you were able to add something like about 200 plus billion dollars between budget last year and budget this year, and you're talking about a $5,000 increase. When you divide that $5,000 per month increase by roughly 30 months, how much do you get? Yeah? How much do you get? Roughly $160 or thereabout a day. My understanding is $160 can't even buy a bag of tennis rolls. Much less the drugs and other medicines that the age and the pensioners require. So you don't get that thing. You get biggest budget ever. And they don't tell you, or they tell you that it's the biggest budget ever that is not being financed through increased taxes. No new tax. That is what I like to say. No new tax. But does no new tax help the poorer class of the people? When they say no new tax, is that something that the poorer class of people should jump up with? Because that is not so. Inflation is a tax. And when you talk about bigger budgets in the context of higher inflation, that affects poor people. That affects poor people more than it affects anybody else, because poor people can't recoup what they're going to be losing in inflation. Bigger budgets without the concomitant production and productivity will result in shortfalls, even as demand rises, because you have more money being pumped into the system. And the only equalizer is inflation, price rises. And who get destroyed during these high prices? The poorer class of the people. The people on fixed incomes. The very people who you claim that you love. Even as you don't mention the word poverty in your entire budget. Even as you do not mention poverty in your entire budget speech. So when you mention, oh, this is the biggest budget ever, and it's not financed by no new taxes, do you tell the people how it's financed subsequently? We'll come to that too. Because, as I said before, I'll say it again, taxes are the lifeblood of a government. A government depends mostly on taxes to meet the public service needs of their people. And while you attempt to make taxes into bad, as if it were a bad thing, tax reform that allows for equitable distribution of income is a good thing, not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But while you are over the last 4 years concentrating your budgets on the private sector, giving away the heart of the taxation system in the hope that it will call forth a responsive increase in production and employment, hence the trickle-down effect. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. And it will seem to me today, Thursday, when they have had virtually no response, and even if there was one, it's the most lukewarm response that would have ever come out from a private sector institution in this country that would have loved on the same budget day to run out with their praises, precept, and everything else. If today, Thursday, I am reading the papers patiently and I can't find any, then they also might be upset with you, with the government, over their budget. They had been accustomed to be preened and awarded with tax concessions and tax breaks and everything else, that they were surprised that this wasn't attended in the very last budget of our budgets, as everybody would call them, an election budget. I heard Mark Phillips saying, this is no election budget. But he might be saying it in a different context. He's right. This is not the election budget, because who are the stakeholders that it speaks to? But don't jump too fast. This is also a private sector budget from the standpoint of the continuation of the infrastructure projects. A concentration on infrastructure. And while I'm on this infrastructure story, I'm going to say it aloud and say it clear. There has to be, in this new round of constitutional reform, or even before constitutional reform, laws put in place to deal with issues of such issues, crying issues as campaign financing for elections and spending during an election year. It has to have laws in place because you see now a slew of projects in this budget that the government is proposing to start, not to continue, to start. And they all suffer from the same defect and absence of feasibility studies. Folks, may I remind you that it was sometime last year, either during a visit to or after a visit to Berbice, that we would hear the president talking about a fixed bridge across the Demerara River. Notwithstanding the fact that the concession for the Berbice Bridge was not going to be up until about, I think, 2 or 3 years from now. Notwithstanding the fact that there has been no study done or no revised study done on the Berbice Bridge, because the original study for the Berbice Bridge, for a cost-effective Berbice Bridge, was between 2 villages that were predominantly African. And that study or that recommendation was discarded for the present location with all its attendant difficulties. But we didn't see any study done. But yet still in budget 2025, a whopping, I think it's $5 billion has been set aside for the start of the Berbice Bridge. I don't know even if they went out to tender. I don't know who has won the award. I don't know what are the financial arrangements for building such a bridge. But you see $5 billion or thereabout that is being set aside for the start of the Berbice Bridge. And I think in that regard, a huge sum of money seems to have been set aside for the payment of the present owners of the bridge, giving the impression that the government is about to buy out the present owners of the bridge. And who will be the beneficiary of the buyout? The major beneficiary of the buyout? Certainly not NIS, whose monies were callously used to invest in the bridge and whose return has been marginal or negligible. And then you hear again some talk about CGIA, Cherry Jagan International Airport, which I much prefer to call Timeri because it was wrongly, it was wrongly renamed. The name was wrongly taken from our indigenous people. We suddenly heard that notwithstanding this never-ending airport that continues to gobble up more and more money, we suddenly heard that this never-ending airport, expansion of airport, had outgrown its capacity and that we may have to build a new terminal. Within months of that discussion, in this budget, you will see a huge sum of money set aside for the start of the building of this new terminal. Where Where's the studies? Where is the studies? Who has been awarded this contract? Why this sum of money? And then, of course, there's another major project called the Quarantine. A bridge across the Quarantine River. A bridge too far. Because we all know Sonam has its financial difficulties. We all know that Sonam is in the throes of an IMF program. We all know that Sonam has difficulty procuring their half of their monies, and we all know that that will not be able to be done in 2025. And if I'm not mistaken, Sonam has the election also this year, if I'm not mistaken. So why would they be finding such huge sums of money to put to a bridge, which for them may not necessarily be a priority? But we have set aside a huge sum of money for the building of the bridge. This is a new project to be started, but its whole financing and other arrangements are opaque, as in all other arrangements with this government. Why are we starting a Quarantine River Bridge in an election year? Why? And then there are huge other projects, widening of the Quarantine Highway, and all these other projects that are not continuation projects. They are now starting in an election year. So that any new government, because these monies had already been committed and in some cases would have been started to execute, and any new government now would be saddled with these projects, saddled with decision whether to mothball them, curtail them, downsize them, or get rid of them. All of which implies billions of dollars that could be impaired. And why should an existing government be saddling a new government with these kinds of expenses? Why should they be crowding out the fiscal space that might be available to a new government? Because elections can be won and be lost, and there's no while an incumbent enjoys advantages and so on, equally an incumbent can lose the election. And hence the need for legislation, and I understand India has such a legislation, to restrict the type of spending that can take place in an election year. But then there's another sinister aspect to all of these projects. The IMF indicates that as much as 41% of the capital expenditure in Guyana is lost to their lovely word called inefficiency. And that lovely word encapsulates all things such as bribery, corruption, projects that have no feasibility study done, projects that are poorly executed, projects that are poorly awarded, not based on the criteria that are being put, all kinds of different aspects that they have, projects that suffer from overruns, cost overruns, all of that is put into this rubric called inefficiency. They estimate 41% of our capital expenditure is lost to inefficiency. That's 41% gone. But in an election year, when you look at this budget, the number of items that can potentially boost the coffers of the party in power are enormous, stupendous, enormous, stupendous. I see my fellow commentators comparing the massive infrastructure budget with the $9 billion they call it cost of living measures that have been set aside in the budget. Look, the $9 billion, as indeed the $7 billion last year and the $5 billion the year before, have given cost of living measures a bad name. These are not $9 billion set aside for any cost of living measure. Ask the government that has failed to tell you what happened to the $7 billion last year. How was that distributed? What gives them the right to come to ask for $9 billion this year when they have given no account of the $7 billion? And since when this omnibus item called cost of living measures has to be included in any budget? Well, you have to wait to see what's going to happen before you distribute the $5 billion. The $5 billion could have distributed in the budget. The $7 billion last year could have been distributed in the budget through higher pensions, higher old age pensions, higher public assistance, through a supplement at the health centers, through any number of things. It could have been distributed right there and then. But when you're using the out of the $7 billion, $1 billion went to fertilizer. That's the only time I heard amongst that had been used from the $7 billion. $1 billion went to fertilizer. Who are the beneficiaries of the fertilizer? Mainly rice farmers. Majority of it went to rice farmers. Because I talked to 2 cash crop farmers and they supplemented it. The bulk of it went to rice farmers. And when you are walking around the place promising people black belly sheep and black duck and all these kinds of things, ostensibly these things are being financed from the cost of living measures. How are these things cost of living? How are they cost of living? What is happening with our money? So when my fellow podcasters and so on, don't match the $9 billion with the massive infrastructure spending. That $9 billion and that $7 billion and $5 billion have never ever been used for cost of living measures. They had mostly, this 5 and the 7, had mostly been used to enrich mainly supporters. Because even the $5 billion also had about $800 million used for fertilizer. And let me ask the government, having given the farmers the fertilizer amount and having been able to crow about the increase in rice production this year, did it bring down the price of rice? Did it bring down the price of rice? No, because that was never the intent. You're going to go wrong and holler how we don't interfere with private markets. But you are giving the state's money, the people's money, to these very people who you claim you don't interfere market. Unlike in Barbados, who had a signed agreement with the private sector about price formation. Here you just give it away. As indeed you are doing with the soil. Massive amounts of the government's money has been injected in preparation, equipment, and so on to produce soil. But is there any contract about the price of soil? No. So, my friends, don't use the $9 billion as cost of living measures. We don't know what are these measures, but I can predict. I will predict for you that having said that another cash grant will be coming in 2025 and having not budgeted for a new cash grant in 2025, but the continuation and completion of the cash grant that was announced last year, that $9 billion, a part of it will be used to pay out a small cash grant towards the election. Take a bit. They paid $25,000 in, I think, 2023. And who knows? They may pay out another $25,000. And that will be your second cash grant. Take it from me. That is what was going to be your cost of living measures, that $9 billion. Meanwhile, other omnibus heads, such as SLED Fund, that has gone now into the billions. Imagine when I started that fund in 2015, it had a mere $100 million. Just over $100 million. Now it's gone into billions of dollars, SLED Fund, and no one knows what this SLED Fund is now financing. But they have an inkling where the money is going and who is getting the money. Then you get massive sums of money that are being transferred to friends and family and so on through the rubric of small business grants. Small business grants and hampers. I was reading Adam Harris's latest notebook in which he referenced a certain area where the hampers were quietly being shared out. And in each hamper was $250,000 envelope. And a good neighbor of one ethnicity was able to secure a hamper for her neighbor of another ethnicity who would not normally have attracted the distributors of the hampers. And when she came home, she was pleasantly surprised that she got an hamper, courtesy of the intervention of her neighbor. And when she went into the hamper basket, there was this envelope with $250,000 in it. That is how our money, and that is where the Auditor General is failing its country as an independent constitutional institution, is failing this country, is failing to audit, serious audit, seriously audit these huge omnibus items and monies that are frittering away, that are given mostly to supporters of the government and causing great angst amongst non-supporters. And so when we talk about biggest budget ever, that seems to concentrate day in and day out on infrastructure. Let us be clear. We're not saying infrastructure is a bad thing. How can that be? All the literature will tell you that investment in infrastructure adds to growth. And indeed, when you look at the gross domestic product, which measures our growth, the biggest contributor in the services sector is construction, coming from investment, coming from mostly public investment, is infrastructure. So we're not complaining, as I saw some comment 2 days ago, some guy commenting and saw infrastructure is not a bad thing. Who says, as an economist, why would I say infrastructure is a bad thing? But balance is a good thing. You can't be spending all the monies in infrastructure and not balancing social welfare. You cannot. Because as people, as people have mockingly said, you can't eat infrastructure. For all infrastructure, if you end up with a population that is not healthy, not literate, not feeling happy, and all these other indicators of wellness and so on, what is the use of the infrastructure? Who will be using this infrastructure? Who will be using this infrastructure? And then the quality of the infrastructure. Where is the infrastructure plan in the first place? To ensure that the infrastructure that you are putting in place is not only adding value, cutting time, creating new avenues for production and so on, but that it's lasting infrastructure. It is not as if in the Heroes Highway that it wasn't built just recently, and every time you pass, you see them patching it. Is that quality infrastructure? Is it quality infrastructure to having cracks in buildings that have just been completed? Don't tell me about the settlement cracks and the spider cracks and this cracks and that cracks. Is that infrastructure? Is that infrastructure that is being done, but you don't see the benefits of it? Or infrastructure that encourages something that you didn't want to happen? Or badly torn out infrastructure that increases transportation time instead of decreasing it? Or infrastructure that is not built with the future in mind, that you can soon have to tear up again because you didn't think it through? So it's not about just infrastructure. It's whether we have an infrastructure plan. It's whether we have a transportation plan. It's whether we have an educational plan. It's whether we have a health plan. Look at the health story. Look at the health story again. Look at the woman who talks about when she met the president in Timeri, and then her RH or Redo or whoever was coming out into these papers and saying everything must have a perspective. Do you have a perspective in health when you have overflowing toilets? What is the perspective? Do you have a perspective in health when you have overgrown trees attacking the building and an unsanitary and unsafe yard populated by alligator, snakes, and vermin? What is the perspective, Mr. REO and Mr. RHO? What is perspective in a health situation? Don't you have to have absolute sanitary conditions when you are dealing with health, bar none? When I was reading this thing this morning, I'm like, is this the kind of people we have running these institutions? No wonder they will be like that, talking about perspective. What perspective you have to have in a health center or in a hospital that is unsanitary and unsafe? What is the perspective that you have to have? And Mr. President, is it management that every time you go on these road shows and you hear these complaints, isn't it better to delegate as this thing to appropriate? If you are a one-man wrecking crew and wrecking ball and putting back together, why don't you dismiss all the ministers that you got? You don't have any need for them. By definition, a minister is the president's helper. And if you got to go and hear all them things, and then you got to call a whole meeting again, notwithstanding the 5:30 meeting seemed to have brought in very little results, you got another one again. I passed there and saw all the cars all over the place, wasting time. They should be doing work. Cars all over the place around the president, just wasting time. Can you take me up in a meeting whole day? What it is that you have achieved? After the first hour, attention span gone. If these people can't do the work, then let them go. It's as simple as that. But you can't take on the role of Superman, and then when you're done, maybe abuse them out or cuss them out or hit them hard, you pat them on the back and tell them you're doing a good job. Because that's what I see. I have an excellent team of ministers who work hard every day. They are working hard every day, producing a mouse. And you are seeing it when you go around in all of your visits. The doctor only felt safe complaining to you because she felt unsafe complaining to her REDO and her RHO, who she probably don't even see. They're too busy doing other things. Fat budget. Money got to make. And so if the regional chairman, if the ministers and they can't control who got to do this work, well then you have to fire them. The buck stops at you. And it can't be a case where, oh, she complain and then you say, oh, the situation has now been resolved. We've sent 3 months supply and all this kind of story. That is not management. That is what you call a temporary fix. But the REDO, the regional health officer, or was the REDO, whoever it is, was right in one thing that he said. That the problem is not germane to Timeri Health Center alone. It is widespread throughout the country. It comes back to the situation. Fix the small things and the bigger things will take care of themselves. But no, you don't fix the small things and you're running and build 12 hospitals. You're running and build 12 brand new hospitals, state of the art, everything else. But you don't have in place what it takes to run 12 brand new state-of-the-art hospitals. You think you're going to run them with them people who can't even run a little health center? You will soon end up with edifices that look like a bunch of carbonicle of concrete. And people will still be running to hospital for treatment. And isn't it clear that spending must lead to outcomes? And that if these outcomes, these measurable outcomes, are not improving, that you're doing something wrong? And as I put out, as we're in the health sector, as I put out, we have some statistics that have either not moved or improved, and in some cases in the health sector, they have declined. What are you doing? You have spent so much money. You've spent you have spent by the end of this year, you would have spent $4.6 trillion. $4.6 trillion. And yet, basic outcomes, basic social sector outcomes will have not improved. Up to last year, without spending this year, you would have spent roughly $3.3 billion. $3.3 trillion. And as I put out last week, Sunday, I put out again this year, today. The crude brought rate for 1,000 has fallen from 2020, when it was 20, to 19.5 when it was 2024. And that in itself was a dramatic decline from 20.34 in 2023. Have you asked your health minister what has been the cause? What has been the cause? Less babies being born, which is not good for a population of only 700 something thousand people. Have you asked the health minister? Look, I'm looking at these statistics. I heard Jordan mention these statistics Sunday gone. I wasn't aware of them. What is going on here? The crude death rate per 1,000. Right? I presume this is how many babies are dying in childbirth, as they call it. It was 6.1 in 2020. And instead of declining, it's gone up to 7.6 in 2024. The crude marriage rate for 1,000. It was 4.4 in 2020 and it's only 4.6 in 2024. Marriage is still the bedrock of family. Why are people not marrying? Why? You claim with all these house lots that you are given. 50,000 house lots. 60,000 new jobs. Those are indicators that should provide confidence in the economy and stability of marriages. It should promote more marriages. So why aren't people married? More people are married, which is still the bedrock of the society. Why aren't people more married? All this money that you spend. Marriages 4.4 in 2020, 4.6 in 2024. Of course, there are other statistics that are quite appalling. Number of nurses per 10,000 declining from 27.6 in 2020 to 21.8 in 2024. And this is itself a decline from 26.8 in 2023. So there has been a systematic decline in nurses from 2020. How are we going to service these 12 hospitals in addition to the other hospitals that will be in place? You said 700 new nurses, 700 nurses alone for the Georgetown Hospital. Where are we going to get these nurses from? We're going to continue importing nurses at the rate at which we are importing and paying them those fancy salaries, fancy in relation to what you're paying those here and the conditions that you are giving them. I say again, nurses love this country. Nurses, like teachers, they love their patients, most of them anyhow. And they are willing to come back if you offer them the same package and conditions that you're offering these people that are coming from India and Bangladesh. Tell me, India and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka are the only sources of nurses in a country that is multiracial, multi-ethnic? Barbados was able to source nurses from Ghana and Nigeria. Don't we have descendants of slaves in Ghana who came from Nigeria, Ghana, and all these places? And can we expect, especially since we know that such nurses and doctors populated the Georgetown Hospital and other hospitals in Guyana in the 1970s and 1980s? You're saying to us we can't spread our compass or a net far and wide into the African diaspora to get nurses and doctors? This is what we are saying? If we pay our nurses and our doctors and our lab technicians and all the health specialists and so on, if we pay them proper salary, even if we have to finance them through a special arrangement, let us do that. We must maintain every trained personnel. Come hell or high water. This business about going further has a very sinister meaning to it. Very, very sinister. Pay the nurses, the doctors, the lab technicians, the pharmacists, the whoever else. Pay them the same money that you are paying. Hit your stomach and pay these people what it will take to keep them here. And it can be done. It can be done. You know why it can be done? Because we got the fiscal space to do it. You know why it can be done? Because we have the capacity to expand that fiscal space even without a single new tax. Even without a single new tax. But in the context of tax reform and tax administration, improved tax administration, even with the existing taxes, tax rates and so on, you can multiply your tax intake multiple times. Multiple times. All the concessions that you are giving away, all the concessions that you turn a blind eye to, the massive increase in smuggling that has taken place since the coalition government has left power. And the characters who are involved in the smuggling. It is as if the government has given up. No new taxes can mean something if you will implement the ones that are existing and implement them fairly. Implement them fairly and resolutely. And in the commissioner, you have somebody who's willing and up to the task. But he can do only so much. And on the expenditure side, massive amount of expenditure is being wasted. Even if you cut that by a mere 10%, the massive wastage, all this nonsense about cost of living measures, that is throwaway money. And over the last, including this year, it would have been $21 billion that would have been available. If you will use that money just to attract and maintain our doctors, our nurses, our teachers, and so forth, it wouldn't cost $21 billion. A reorientation of expenditure alone can save at least 15% of this budget, which can be used to pay proper salaries and so on. But it takes a government with vision to do such reorientation. It takes a government that got the guts to tell Gaisuko enough is enough. Imagine another $13.1 billion to Gaisuko. That would have taken the transfers to Gaisuko since 2015 to about $120 billion. And this corporation that was able to produce 102,000 tons of sugar in 2018 with 7 sugar estates is now expected to repeat that performance 7 years afterwards, when it was only able to make 47,000 thereabouts last year and 60,000 the year before. How will that happen? How will that happen? You know, when we were telling the government that oil has had it was getting a stranglehold on this country, and that all our survival instincts that kicked in when we didn't have oil. You know, people ask us how we existed when we didn't have oil. And yet we were able to produce in a non-oil economy credible outcomes, incredible indicators. We had, for example, between that period, 2015 to May 2015 to August the 2nd, 2020, during that period, a total of $1.347 trillion was available for spending by the government. That is what the government used up in its five years, 2.5 months. And it's important that we were able to do growth rate, grow the GDP growth rate by an average of 4.1% during that period. And I heard Mr. Mann in his budget speech calling it anemic. Compared to our anemic growth rate of 4.1%, they were able to grow the economy by these leaps and bounds percent. Well, everybody knows. Again, as I said, you know, it depends on what you do with statistics. Because first of all the fancy growth that has taken place between 2020 and last year was due to the predominance of oil in the economy. So oil versus non-oil. It was due to the predominance of oil in the economy. But when you stripped oil, which earned 91% of our export earnings, merchandise export earnings last year, and is expected to earn 89% of the export earnings this year. If you strip away oil from the GDP, you have a basis for comparison, not a one-to-one basis, because let us be very clear, even if you strip away oil and you get to what is called the non-oil economy, the non-oil economy is dragged along by the oil economy. In other words, then, if you shut down oil tomorrow, then a number of places in the non-oil economy will shut down. The demand for housing will reduce, and then rents may eventually come down, maybe a good thing. The demand for foods generally will go down, especially demand for imported food that has risen sharply over the last 5 years. The demand for services, all kinds of services, manufacturing, industrial, all these different kinds of services, all those will go down. But those are in the non-oil economy. So the non-oil economy growth rate has only had an uptick over the last 2 years. But for the prior years, it was stagnant. It was anemic. In one place, it was negative. Don't call our growth negative, because I have a series of growth rates going back from the 1990s. In fact, let me tell you, because, you know, sometimes, as I said, numbers are better than political rhetoric. Between 1993 and 1999, the average growth rate was 5.3%, 1993 to 1999. The average growth rate 0.3%. And that is the period when you had the Dragons as president, and you had Asghar Ali and Jagdeo as ministers of finance. The average growth rate was 5.3%. And in particular, Asghar Ali inherited the economic recovery program that had been put in place by the PNC government and which had shown signs of renewed growth in 1991, when I think 6.1% was 6.1% was returned. PNC. The 6.1% was returned. 1992, I think, was 7.4%, and it continued. It continued into 1993. I think it continued in 1994, and then it started tapering off. But overall, for that period, 1993 to 1999, the average growth rate was 5.3%. Between 2000 and 2009, between 2000 and 2009, a period that is covered by the presidency of Jagdeo, and he held on to the Minister of Finance when he was president also, and only was forced to put in a minister in the office, the president with responsibility for finance, in Sheikh Narain Kaulasar back in 1999, when they had to go to Parliament for the monies to pay out the Armstrong Award. That's the only time he didn't relinquish the rule, as you see. That's unlike people think that is only Ashney. It's Sheikh Narain Kaulasar, who was the fourth minister in the office, the president with responsibility for finance. But the Takan and the public service later on to Ashley Singhs. During the period 2000 to 2009, the average growth rate was 1.9%. 1.9%. Let us be clear. Jagdeo was the president and the Minister of Finance. But he appointed Kaulasar as Minister in the Office, President with responsibility for finance. And I believe, so 1.9%. Between 2010 and 2014, which is mostly the presidency of Ramatar, and I believe the finance minister was Ashmi Singh. Between that period, the average growth rate in that period was 4.7%. 4.7%. And the last year of that period, 2014, there was it showed a systematic decline. The growth rate had started to decline. But the average was 4.7% because in the first 2 years or so, it was 5.7%. So when you average is 4.7% and you comparing my 5 years of 4.1%, that's anemic. Numbers don't lie. And in that anemic years, when my average growth rate was 4.1%, my inflation rate for the average inflation rate for that entire period was 0.9%. 0.9%. So what that means is that the salaries and so on that we were paying, we were able to control inflation even as the economy was growing. And even as we had paid a salary increase for that entire period of roughly 77%. Comrades are listening? We were able to pay salary increases of 77%. We were able to pay pension increases every single year. We were able to pay public assistance increase every single year. Every single year. In that period, we had the highest production of rice in 2019, 682,081 tons. Only surpassed by this year's production of 704,000 tons or whatever the case may be. We had the highest declaration of gold, 641.28 ounces. for which you're struggling to get. Last year it was 434,067, and you projected 501,000 2055 and 2025. Sugar, in no instance have you been able to surpass 2019 sugar of 92,256,000. Certainly not the 60,000 that you produced in 2023, and definitely not the 47,103 that you produced last year. But guess what? We're back to oil. We said oil prices were going to fall, and we gave the reasons why. And the outlook for oil is not looking good. Oil prices not looking good. Not looking good. Gaza is holding. And President Trump has ordered Putin, that is the most I could say, to end the war. But there are hopes that his presidency will bring an end to the war sooner than later. And with that into the equation, the projections for oil this year, oil prices this year and next year, is to fall even further than the projection. But notwithstanding, the budget speech's 10%, 10.9% reduction in oil has forced the government to come up with these magical figures of 2025 to maintain some semblance in the madness that is taking place. Every one of these targets for 2025, every one appears to be plucked out of the blues. Of course, we know the sugar one is madness. Notwithstanding rice's performance last year, 804,000 tons in 2025 appears to be a stretch. Gold's 501,000 tons, rising by another 67,000 tons from last year, seems to be a stretch. And notwithstanding all the fancy talk about bauxite and who got new kiln and who want to aluminum and aluminium and so on, bauxite 4.4 million tons in 2025, which is two plus times more than it did in 2024. It's another stretch. It will be the first time in a long while in an election year that I would see people being less than conservative in the estimates, knowing that election years have all kinds of country dunks and whatever else. It will be the first time. So these are a stretch. But you know why they're stretching it? They're stretching it because oil's contribution to GDP, overall GDP, will not be the star-studded ones that it had done in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. And they must prepare the population for this kind of performance going forward. Because as the base gets bigger, it is going to be increasingly harder to produce growth rates of 40-something% and so on. In fact, I do not believe that we are going to hear again of growth rates of 40-something% and above in the future. And when we taper off at 1.3 million, growth rates are going to be stagnant thereafterwards. Let us tell the population like it is. Stop fooling the population. And so they come up with these fantastic projections to dampen the impact of oil. Hence, you're seeing while you're having an overall growth rate of 10.9%, I think it is, for 2025, you're having an even larger growth rate in the non-oil sector of 13.2%. But if you want to put realistic targets for 2025, the non-oil growth rates will be single digits, not double digits. And of course, I know we run out of time, but of course, to tell me that inflation is 2.9% last year, and then it's going to be 2.8% this year, in light of even more massive spending, not backed by any major increases in supply, is to suggest to me that the incoherence of this budget, none more so visible than the statement that was put out by the Ministry of Finance on Sunday, seeking to explain the new tax measures, the new income tax measures. You know, I had to laugh, and I went back to one of my budget speeches, and I will more than one. And in those budget speeches, when we want to make a tax change, we will explain in the budget speech how it may affect somebody. And you're suggesting to me in a 110-page speech, 5 hours and 10 minutes, you could not, in very simple terms, tell people what these tax measures can be. But then, after listening to me, and I have a clue also, because I had made public that one of the reforms that should take place is in the marginal rates, because for the entire period of the government, no adjustment to the marginal rates of income tax had been made. And I suggested that, and I indicated that had we remained in power, we would have reduced the 28 to 25. We would have brought in a middle rate of 30%, and we would have reduced the 40 to 35. And while we were doing that, we were going to pull down the non-commercial corporate tax from what it is now of 25%, which is what we put it at, to 20% by the end of our second 5 year. That's the broad outlines of it. Lo and behold, a whole budget speech of 2025 was read, and all it indicated was a slight reduction in the marginal rate from 28 that we put in there since 2017 to 25 in 2025. But nothing on the 40. And I was discussing this with a couple of people, and I don't know which one of them might have signal, listen, or if the private sector or whoever else you think. But lo and behold, in a statement on Sunday by the Ministry of Finance, sneaked into the statement was that they were going to cut the top marginal rate from 40% to 35%. An announcement that had not been made at the time of the budget. It just goes to show you the hodgepodge. It just goes to show you the incoherence. Because the budget would have been put together on the premise that we were only cutting the marginal rate from 28 to 25, resulting in a loss of X amount. But now when you cut the top marginal rate outside of the framework of the budget, that loss has to be made up somewhere. Unless they are going to incur an even larger budget deficit that they had indicated in the budget speech. And again, as we go back to this business about largest budget ever that is not financed by any tax increases, let us be very clear again. Budget deficits lead to public debt. Budget deficit lead to public debt. And the public debt, as we have found out, has been growing quite alarmingly. The public debt has been growing quite alarmingly. And the public debt is now estimated to rise to about $7.6 billion by the end of 2025, having reached $6 billion at the end of last year. $6 billion US dollars. Now, they may come and say, well, listen, it was 47% of GDP under the coalition in 2019, and it's now just 27%. But the only reason for that, of course, as you know, is a GDP that is magnified 5 times. A GDP that is magnified 5 times. So both the GDP and the debt itself are growing. So the debt to GDP ratio, because the bottom is growing faster than the top. In other words, the denominator is growing way faster than the numerator. Hence, this what is perceived to be a reduction. But that statistic doesn't negate the fact that your debt itself, your nominal debt, is growing at a massive rate. And that nominal debt has to be paid back from a non-oil GDP. Oil GDP that you have stuck the debt on, it is better to get an appreciation and a measurement of the two between 2019 and today, putting it on the non-oil GDP. But they don't give you non-oil GDP for you to be able to make that. They just give you a percent growth in non-oil GDP, but they don't give you the actual number of that non-oil GDP for us to make own decisions. But if you were to put it on the non-oil GDP, because of the massive influence of the oil in our GDP, that statistic that seems favorable at 27% will deteriorate markedly when you put it on the non-oil GDP. And so, our friends, we have to be extremely worried as citizens that in light of projected falling oil prices, which can partly be made up from the increased production that is expected, revenues from this source will fall. It means that our intake into the natural resource fund will fall. It means that people like Terence Campbell, who's concerned for the spending of our monies in the natural resource fund, should be taken on board and also rally around him for a new regime or for the existing regime to be enforced, which is we must know what you're spending our money on. You have withdrawn in the last three years. In the last 3 years, you have withdrawn 640 billion Ghana dollars. And by the end of this year, you would have withdrawn $1.2 trillion, close to that. But the concern must be that in this year alone, you are going to withdraw roughly 2.5 billion US dollars out of approximately 2.6 billion earnings for 2025 in the election year. This can only be boosting election coffers. This can only be a boost election coffers. So we have to look out. We have to raise our voices up that the monies are available, but the poor, for which poverty is 48% and perhaps have risen since then, the poor are the ones who continue to suffer. Poor salaries, poor welfare conditions, poor safety nets, and NIS that is not paying its beneficiaries proper pensions and other benefits, a government that seems willing to mismanage our resources. We all know the story about the health voucher in a country that is going to have 12 brand new hospitals. You're still giving health vouchers. And of course, it's the creative means of transferring wealth to the very people, friends, family, flatterers, and so on. And we see it all over in every sector. In every sector. contracts being awarded to friends, and so on. So this money, the nation's money, is being transferred. The wealth is the nation is being transferred to a select group, while others are asked to chase an illusionary $100,000 cash grant and use it to create intergenerational wealth. I know the debate starts tomorrow, and I know my time went way over time, and I mean, these things you can. Well, as I said, this is budget weekend, and we can continue the discussion, and we're hoping for a robust debate in Parliament. We're hoping on who's comatose and who they upon like support that an injection of good saline will be made, and that they will come out blazing tomorrow as the debate opens, and we will see that silver lining on the horizon of a change in government grow larger as the year progresses. Thank you, Kuda.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan, and thank you to viewers for tuning in. It's now 27 minutes past the 9 o'clock hour. I know you've had your fill. I don't think you can be asking for anything else. My recommendation on programs like these is that you take the time, you go back. It's always on CAMS TV, and you listen and you re-listen, because there is so much there for you to pay attention to. Okay, it's another Thursday. There's going to be karaoke at Club Twilight tonight, so you can come down to Club Twilight and, support the cause, support the thing, buy a beer or two. And definitely Sunday, I'd like to see out in your numbers as you come to support the thing called Big People Bacchanal, Oldies After Lunch Line.
Club Twilight presents Sunday, 26th January, the Big People After Lunch and Oldies Bacchanal. Yes, at Club Twilight, Sideline down Buxton North. Music by Super Cat One Man Band, CAMS Audio, Disco Baby, and popular DJs. Check it out. It's the Big People After Lunch Oldies Bacchanal at Club Twilight, Sunday, 26th January. It's gonna be a back in time movie.